Hello everyone. In this video, I am about to share a surprising secret from my past that I have kept under wraps for quite some time. My name is Samantha Harper. I am 3 decades old. I am years old and reside in California, USA. My life is characterized by a sense of peace and stability. I tied the knot with Alexander at the age of 25. Our journey together has spanned 5 reasonable years, creating a serene and uncomplicated existence. Alexander embodies kindness and thoughtfulness. Alexander is immersed in the world of finance, frequently traveling far from home. Despite his demanding job, he prioritizes his family and supports me in every possible way. Our relationship is strengthened by mutual respect and love, with minimal arguments. While it may not be overflowing with passion, it is steady and strong. We reside in a small suburban house nestled in a tranquil and secure part of Los Angeles. The tranquility of this place, surrounded by lush greenery and welcoming neighbors, brings me great joy. Working from home on straightforward office tasks grants me the flexibility to modify my schedule as necessary. Alexander frequently finds himself away during the day and embarks on business trips that can extend for several days, leaving me with a sense of loneliness during his frequent absences. I became accustomed to it. We developed a bond of trust and understanding. Alexander was a person I could depend on, and I recognized that he consistently made efforts to secure our future. His family resided nearby. My brother-in-law, Ethan, who is the husband of Isabel, Alexander's older sister, is 3 years younger than Alexander. At just 27 this year, Ethan has a cheerful personality, and I have always found him to be very approachable. With infectious enthusiasm and unwavering dedication, he approaches every aspect of life, from work to the little moments in family life. Isabel and Ethan reside in a nearby neighborhood, and I frequently encounter them at family gatherings or special events. However, what surprised me most was how Ethan became an unexpected fixture in my daily routine whenever Alexander was away on business. During those times, I often found myself home alone, and Ethan would graciously drop by to lend a hand. Whether he was fixing appliances, tending to my garden, or simply adding joy and companionship to my sometimes solitary existence, his presence was a welcome relief. Initially, I didn't think much of it. After all, Ethan was my brother-in-law, a part of the extended family I had embraced since marrying Alexander. I always felt at ease around him. In Ethan's presence, our conversations flowed frequently about the little things in life. From our hobbies to the movies we both loved. Those stories helped me forget the emptiness when Alexander was away. Sometimes I even felt that Ethan's presence helped me feel less absent from Alexander. Really knew how to make others feel cared for with his sophistication and sense of my marriage humor. My marriage to Alexander was nothing special, but it wasn't too tense or full of conflict either. We lived in a certain peace. But gradually I realized that there was a greater distance between us. Alexander's frequent absences from his business trips that lasted weeks made me feel increasingly distant from him. Although he was always attentive and dutiful, I couldn't ignore the undeniable absence of something crucial between us: passion and a profound emotional connection. Since our marriage, I came to realize that I felt deprived, not just emotionally but also sexually. Alexander, being a serious man, rarely expressed intimacy or romance, which gradually left me feeling lonely. Even in his presence, I found myself yearning for the affection and attention that were seldom given by my husband. In our togetherness, intimacy felt more like an obligation than a shared emotional experience. I often questioned whether I was asking for too much or if Alexander simply lacked the ability to fulfill the emotional needs I craved. As time passed, a significant void began to take shape in my heart, one that I couldn't seem to fill. On the night of May 15, 2008, as was often the case, Alexander was away on a business trip. And his sister Isabel was also absent. Home alone. I busied myself with errands in the quiet. Alexander's frequent business trips had made me accustomed to the stillness of the house during his absences. That evening, Ethan, my brother-in-law, arrived to assist with some repairs. His presence was familiar and routine, as he often came to lend a hand when Alexander was away. I had always placed my trust in Ethan, viewing him as a reliable, compassionate, and humorous individual. In the past, our interactions had radiated warmth, akin to that of family. However, that night, something felt off. He didn't show up. From the moment Ethan walked into the house, I sensed a subtle shift in his demeanor. Everything appeared normal. Yet there was something different about his gaze. It was no longer the innocent look I was accustomed to, instead. It held a deeper concern that made me uneasy. We sat in the living room, chatting about mundane topics. Ethan spoke of work and life with Isabel, but each sentence seemed to carry a weight that our usual closeness lacked. There was an unsettling heaviness in the air, as if something was wrong. Ethan's gaze lingered on me, deeper and more searching, as if he wanted to express something he couldn't articulate. Before I could fully grasp the situation, Ethan abruptly stood and moved closer to me. He circled behind my chair and placed his hand on my shoulder with an intimacy I had never experienced before. I flinched, my heart racing in my chest as surprise and worry surged within me. This was not the way Ethan typically interacted with me. Something felt off. I made an effort to remain composed, rose to my feet, and created some space between us. I hesitated to create an uncomfortable moment. Yet it was evident that something was shifting. And not positively. When I inquired if Ethan needed anything, he remained silent. Immediately, rather. He remained frozen in place, gazing with conflicted eyes. He appeared to wrestle with emotions that eluded his grasp. The atmosphere thick with unspoken tension. The air grew thick with tension, each breath I took felt heavy as I sensed the impending shift in our dynamic. Worry gnawed at me, knowing that Ethan was grappling with something he could no longer conceal. He stepped closer, the space between us diminishing and his presence loomed large, unsettling me. The room, once filled with camaraderie, transformed into a charged atmosphere, thick with unspoken emotions. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was a low murmur. Yet each word struck with an unsettling force. He admitted to thinking about me too much, acknowledging that his feelings were misplaced. But the confession spilled out, leaving me reeling from the impact of his revelation. I was completely stunned by what I had just heard. All the trust, all the family relationships that I had always valued seemed to be shattered. I couldn't believe that Ethan, my brother-in-law, the man I had always thought I could trust, could say these things. He was suggesting that something might be going on between us, that he was thinking about me in ways I had never imagined. Those words were not only shocking but also filled me with a deep sense of fear. I was completely confused and my mind was in turmoil. Part of me wanted to react immediately, to push Ethan away and ask him to leave the house. I wanted to stick to my principles, to do the right thing. This was my brother-in-law's husband's sister's husband, and this situation should not have happened. It was so wrong that I felt like I was being crushed by a tsunami of morality, reason, and everything I had always believed in. But then there was another part of me, a part one didn't dare admit, that was drawn to the temptation and emotions. Ethan had stirred temptation and emotions up. How long had it been since I felt close to a man I had been craving? For love, for care and closeness, something that Alexander had been unable to give me. For a long time, his constant business trips and his cold indifference had pushed me into a loneliness that I did not want to admit. The feeling of lack of affection and loneliness blurred the line between right and wrong. Ethan was not just a family member but also a man full of charm. His eyes looking at me were not just those of a brother-in-law but those of a man who wanted me. I felt a conflict rising inside me between my loyalty to Alexander's and my weakness in the face of Ethan's irresistible charm. I stood there trying to analyze the situation. But my mind was in turmoil. Reason told me that I had to stop to protect my marriage, to maintain my morals, but my instincts and emotions pulled me in the other direction, stirring up secret desires that I had suppressed for so long. In that moment, the thoughts of what might have happened if I hadn't rejected did Ethan come to me? Obscure yet captivating images danced through my thoughts. Like an enticing call I understood was misguided. I understood that delving further into this relationship would unravel everything, from my marriage to Alexander to my familial bond with Isabel. The repercussions would be monumental and irreversible. Yet, I found myself irresistibly pulled into a tempest of intense emotions that I had yearned for. I had never allowed myself to acknowledge that I craved change. That I sought something new to fill the emptiness within me. As I gazed at Ethan, I could sense the tension and desire radiating from him. The atmosphere thickened, and my heart raced in my chest. My mind urged me to put an end to it all. To halt everything before it spiraled out of control. But my heart and emotions had other plans. I couldn't shake the haunting thoughts of what might have transpired had I not turned him down. That night, Ethan and I crossed a line from which there was no turning back. The warnings in my mind about the consequences of the destruction of our family if this were discovered seemed to be pushed back into the dark corners of my consciousness. Our affair had officially begun. Quietly. Like an undercurrent. Pushing me into a world of emotions I had never experienced before. Initially, we attempted to maintain our distance, avoiding any indications that could raise suspicion. Our meetings occurred only in the absence of Alexander and Isabel, seizing fleeting yet fervent moments during Ethan's visits to my home. What began as simple errands gradually transformed into irresistible encounters. We were acutely aware of the wrongness of our actions, recognizing that we were treading into perilous territory. Yet, it was the very prohibition and secrecy surrounding this relationship that intensified our connection. Especially with each of Alexander's business trips. I was acquainted with Ethan. He would appear. And I felt an undeniable pull. One that eclipsed logic and ethics. The pangs of guilt were mere echoes against the thrill of our clandestine existence. A secret shared solely between us. The bond, whether love or infatuation, between Ethan and me intensified. Even as we acknowledged the inevitable downfall. Each time Ethan departed, I was forced to face the truth: Alexander remained a devoted husband. And the faith he had in me cast a shadow of betrayal over my heart. I gazed into his eyes. Eyes that held unwavering certainty. And a wave of guilt surged through me. Alexander remained oblivious to the moments I had shared with his brother-in-law within the very home that symbolized our peace and trust. What once felt like a bond now transformed into a heavy burden, pressing down on me during our time together. It wasn't just Alexander, his sister Isabel was entwined in this tangled web as well. Burdened every time I saw Isabel, I couldn't help but feel ashamed. She was the one who had always treated me well. Always considered me as part of the family. And I, in her eyes, was still a sister-in-law that she could trust. But now our relationship was tainted by a secret that I could not share. Every time I saw Isabel laughing and talking carefreely, my heart felt like it was being cut deeper. I knew that if she found out the truth, everything would fall apart, all the family relationships would be ruined, and I would never be able to forgive myself. However, the sad thing was that despite being fully aware of the consequences, I couldn't stop. Every time I promised myself that I would stop, that this would be the last time, I let myself get caught up in this vortex. I didn't have the strength to get out. The intoxication and excitement of living in the dark made it easy for me to be pulled back. The promises that this will be the last time seemed to be just lies that I told myself. This relationship gradually became a spiral with no way out. The guilt of being with Alexander and Isabel, the fear of being discovered, all created a terrible burden in my heart. But at the same time, the excitement, the attraction that Ethan brought made me unable to give. I was torn between reason and emotion, caught in a struggle between duty and desire. We found ourselves trapped, fully aware that we couldn't persist. Yet, each encounter with Ethan only deepened our connection, drawing us nearer to the edge. The pull between us was undeniable, transforming our clandestine meetings from infrequent encounters into an integral part of our existence, something we were unwilling to relinquish. I found myself caught in a relentless cycle of guilt and longing, perpetually conflicted between the urge to break free and the magnetic pull of this forbidden relationship. The path out of this turmoil eluded me, just as it did for Ethan. Each encounter was a tumultuous blend of guilt and overwhelming passion, a dance of emotions that left us breathless. We both understood the stakes. Discovery would shatter our lives and tear our families apart, leaving us to face the inevitable fallout. Yet, it was that very sense of danger, the thrill of the forbidden, that made it all the more difficult to let go. Ultimately, the truth could not remain hidden, and the reality of our situation came crashing down, exposing everything in an instant. One night, when Isabel stumbled upon the messages exchanged between Ethan and me, I realized in that instant that I understood everything was falling apart. Isabel could not believe what she saw. The truth about the secret relationship between me and her husband was a strong blow that left her completely stunned from that moment on. A storm of accusations and anger began. The family immediately fell into chaos. Isabel, in extreme pain and disappointment, could not believe that the sister-in-law she trusted had betrayed her. And Ethan, the man she once thought was her devoted husband, had now become the one who had betrayed her all along. Alexander caught between the betrayal of his wife and his brother. He did not know how to react and could only silently face the cruel truth. The confrontation between us followed Isabel, who faced me in a storm of tears and anger. She screamed, demanding an explanation from me. But I could say nothing but silence. Any words at that moment were meaningless because the truth was so obvious. Ethan, who had been at the center of the relationship, also tried to explain, but his words could not soothe the pain and anger in Isabel's heart. Alexander, who had always been a calm and unemotional husband, now stood still, unable to say a word. He looked at me, his eyes full of disappointment and pain, as if he could not believe that his wife could do such a terrible thing. I knew in that moment that all trust between us had been completely broken. There was nothing that could save this marriage. Nothing that could heal the wound I had caused. The relationship between Alexander and me quickly came to an end. We separated shortly after, and I knew that any attempt to save it would be in vain. Everything between us was broken beyond repair. The years we had built together, the good memories, were now only in the past. Ark and Isabel could no longer live together after the truth was revealed. Everything between them collapsed. Isabel could not forgive Ethan, and their relationship also came to an end. Both of them understood that this family could not survive after being destroyed by the sinful relationship between me and Ethan. After all, Ethan and I were both immersed in regret and guilt. Everything we had, everything we had built, was now just a pile of rubble. I felt like a traitor not only to Alexander but also to Isabel, who I once considered my sister. This wrong relationship not only destroyed my marriage but also tore apart my family. Every time I think about what happened, I can't help but feel pain and shame for my wrong decisions. Now all that is left is regret and a sense of loss that cannot be filled. I know that it is too late to fix what Ethan and I did will haunt me for the rest of my life. Every time I face myself, I see the image of a saboteur who has destroyed everything good that once existed. Ed, in my life. This is wrong. The relationship has made me lose everything. The bond of family and self-connection.